Hello, it's Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet. So pleased to have you on this podcast today. We've got Laura Gelder-Robertson on the line. Laura is the fairly newly appointed CEO of VetSustain, which is doing great work around veterinary sustainability and has been going for a number of years now. But Laura's coming with a wealth of experience. She's not a vet, but she's worked in government, she's worked in industry with pharmaceutical firms. So she's got so much experience, and I think has just gone past her 100 days around Earth Day time. We were hoping to run this around about Earth Day. We're a couple of weeks late, but nevertheless, it's fantastic to have you on, Laura. And maybe just before we start delving into some of the exciting stuff that VetSustain are doing, just maybe fill in a bit of that CV and that picture for people who are listening who don't know who you are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've got 25 years of experience in business and sustainability, and I have primarily worked in innovation. So a lot of my work was with sectors in pharmaceuticals, like you said, in healthcare, retail, agriculture and land use, light manufacturing, FMCG, and I moved into sustainability more recently and went to study the climate science and the solutions at the Institute for Sustainable Leadership at Cambridge, where I now assess on their net zero course. So I have a really good overview of how different sectors are trying to solve sustainability problems, both nationally and internationally. And what I'm really excited about now is delving into veterinary specifically as a sector, because I've done lots of work in the last couple of years, in particular on healthcare and people health, but this is starting to bring in the animal as well as people and planetary health into it. So that's my Venn diagram for success, if you like.
So a real One Health approach now.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it's really the first time that I've deep dived into One Health. We touched on it in healthcare, but I think because vets sit so closely to that interface with other species and nature, they're very aware of it and quite sophisticated around their understanding of it in a way that I don't think other sectors are. So there you have a set of professionals and their customers, the pet owners,
Yes.
and the farmers, who are really deeply already connected to nature and other species. And I think that means that as a sector and as a profession, they could actually be quite catalytic in their impact on society and on being able to achieve some of the big sustainability goals we need to achieve.
You've got through your first 100 days. I know obviously you've been probably spending a lot of time envisioning and talking to the board and various people as well. Have you got something to share with us around that kind of vision and roadmap where VetSustain is going? Obviously, you've been around for several years now, doing great work, has been very volunteer-led, obviously beginning to make some partnerships, so there's a bit of money in the bank to allow you to do some things. Where do you see yourself going in the next 1 to 3 years? It sounds like an interview question for a job, doesn't it? But yeah, what's the vision and the roadmap?
You are making me think back to my interview questions now, where I was building off that idea that the veterinary profession is really well placed to actually step up a gear and do something really interesting with their understanding of the intersection between animals, people and planetary health. And what I've been doing in my first 100 days is a big listening exercise to all of our commercial supporters, all of our working groups. We've probably got about 106 people that we're interacting with, and the board of brilliant executives and Hannah, my colleague. And we've put all of their thinking onto a giant mirror board that we have then distilled down into 5 big ideas that will carry us forwards. And I'll move on to those in a little bit. But everything that we do comes back to our purpose. And our purpose is very clear: to enable veterinary professionals to become leading forces for sustainability. And we've got 3 different ways we've traditionally done that in the last 5 years. So that's through our tools and courses, the network and community that we build, and our leadership and advocacy. What I'd love us to do in the next phase is to really bring to life what we're calling the 6 W's of veterinary sustainability. Now, I know you've got a personal link to that, Anthony.
Yeah, well, I love the 6 W's. I was sitting in a bar in a restaurant with Ed Bailey, who was at our Veterinary Green discussion forum in London in last June. So I got to know Ed, well. So we met up again with Jeremy Johnson, who's doing some fantastic work in Australia, all around carbon and all around sustainable practice. And then Ed introduced me to this 6W concept, which I said, oh, I like that, because I do like a a 7 R's or a 6 W's. It's always a good way to kind of explain things. And actually, they've been done in a really nice, I think, holistic way. Because I might say I'm a climate skeptic in the sense of I don't want us to be so obsessed with carbon and then forget all about all the other things. I was walking the Camino over Easter, and it was the Camino Inglés, and there were lots and lots of gum tree plantations growing for various reasons, but I'm sure they help with the carbon. But you walk through them and it was pretty silent because gum trees, as you know, come from Australia, not from Portugal, and not from Spain. Because actually, I was on the Camino Portugues the year before, and that was much more natural and much more biodiverse, and you were seeing so much more wildlife than you were seeing on the Camino Inglés. So it's no good as being so obsessed with carbon that we're planting all these trees, but we're actually destroying biodiversity at the same time.
Well, absolutely. And coming back to your point on One Health, what we wanted to do was come up with something that's quite easy and people can use as a short mental checklist, like the 6 W's, but it's broad enough that it's encompassing most of the aspects of the SDGs. So it comes from the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that Ed and the team sort of synthesized down into 6 goals originally when they set up Vet Sustain, and now we've translated that into the 6 W's, which I should probably name, seeing as we're talking about them. We've got welfare, wildlife, warming, well-being, water and waste. And really the idea is that forms a strategic lens that anyone can use, whatever part of the veterinary profession they're in, to help them make decisions and to almost, I think of it like the zoom lens on a camera, where sometimes you're sort of in on the macro lens, the thing in your gaze, and so you're not thinking more broadly around some of the implications of the choices that you make, but just being able to just relax your grip a little bit and come out and say, are there some implications of what we're doing for wildlife or welfare here that we can weave in, and not getting too hooked, like you said, on one single issue or river of thinking. We could get really into net zero. I'm an assessor on it at Cambridge, but actually, a lot of what we talk about is far broader than environmental issues, and absolutely the social side of the way that we need to approach solving.
And to use an example of that, I love the work that Aviva are doing with the Wetland Trust. They've put in they've promised £100 million. I mean, it's a massive amount of money. But then you realise that creating more wetlands also brings in mitigation, which I think is important, because we know we're going to probably have more floods in the next 10, 20 years. If those reserves flood but the houses around don't, then that's a huge saving for an insurance company. We know that wetlands sequester carbon probably better than trees do. And we know that wetlands are usually very biodiverse areas. So, and often will clean up water if water goes through polluted, from farm runoff. That will often cleanse the water before it then goes back into the river and down to the sea. So it's those sort of projects that are so holistic and so kind of beautifully created, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I'm always excited to hear about partnerships that are moving slightly across sector and sometimes to non-obvious partnerships. So Aviva, absolutely, I saw them talk recently at ED. They're at quite an interesting interface because they're an insurance company, and so many of the issues as climate related risks start to manifest will affect their business. So they are hugely engaged in educating people, in building people's knowledge and confidence and skills to start taking action. And I think that's what it's about. A lot of the time the conversation in sustainability is about the urgent need to act, but it misses the agency side of giving people a stepping stone into, okay, so what does that mean for me in my day job? How would I intersect into it? Do I need to get my arms around the whole world to solve, some big problem like climate change or biodiversity loss? And the answer is no, absolutely not. You can affect change in whatever context you've got, and there's loads of different activities and actions that you can take. And moving on to the 5 big ideas, one of them is around starting to build the business case that says, okay, depending on your context, let's look at what some of those steps would be for you. It doesn't matter if you're a really small independent or you're a really big corporate. You've all got actions and there's a lot of similarity between them, but there's also some differences. So where do you start? How can we speed date you to the simplest understanding of where to begin?
I've had solar panels on my roof for the last 17 years, thermal and then PVs. And 2 years ago, I added a battery. So that's been a process. I didn't have PVs from day one. I had two solar thermals on that was creating a lot of my own hot water during the summer. 10 years, 11 years ago, I put solar PVs on. And then about 2 years ago, I put batteries in. So it was a journey that I went on. And I did it because it was the right thing to do. But actually, now I think the actual creation of kilowatt hours through solar is much cheaper than using gas. I now get free electric. This month I've spent about £30 on powering my house. I've taken gas out of my cooking. I've got an induction hob. I still have gas central heating, but I have decarbonised. And actually, the other thing is, of course, because the grid is decarbonising, we're all doing better because of the work that's being done at that level. So I did it for the right reasons, but there's now an economic sense in,
Yes.
if you have a roof and you have 10, 20,000 pound languishing in the bank, put it on your roof and it's making 20% a year for you because it pays back in 5 years and then you have 20 years of, 15, 20% return on investment. What is there not to like about that? And you're doing good as well.
Absolutely. And with my cross sector hat on, we're just about to articulate 50 different ideas within the financial services sector that I'm going to be bringing forwards into veterinary later in the year at London Vet Show, where any professional can walk through in 3D what those actions look like in a sort of microcosm 3D installation. So if you imagine a mini operating space with a prep room and a little kennels and a reception area and a store cupboard and a mobile pickup kit bag area, we can articulate what those 50 ideas look like. Is it solar PV on the roof? Is it switching to a green energy tariff in energy? But we'll look across the different aspects holistically, both in terms of nature and biodiversity and also in terms of carbon. Again, the 6Ws, this is where you can bring it to life, but make it very concrete and tangible for people. Because I think sometimes we talk about things and they feel either very expensive or very complicated, or it's not immediately obvious how you would get started and do them. And I think we need to make it a lot easier. So part of defining the business case is how can we in 3D showcase for people the best of what this sector is already doing, because there's loads of small, medium and big businesses who are pulling in the right direction, and we're going to crowdsource them and showcase a really positive news story that says, look at how brilliant you are, look at how many ideas, solutions you've already got, and if you didn't know about them already, come and browse through them and find your pathway through, no matter what size or level of sophistication you've got.
And it's starting on the journey because I've read obviously articles, even big CEOs go, I don't really want to talk about this because I don't know where to start. Therefore, it's better not to start. Or, I speak to one company, we're beginning to talk about this, but, I was inviting them to the Veterinary Green Discussion Forum and they said, well, we're not quite ready. No, well, you need to come because that's where you're going to learn and have the enthusiasm and the drive to then take forward. The one thing we're going to use renewable energy this year. I mean, I think now because we are decarbonising the grid, a lot of energy, 50% plus is renewable anyway, isn't it? That people are taking into the house. So sometimes we think we've got to do it on our own, but there's all sorts of help,
Absolutely.
both externally in the bigger world, but also, as you've said, people doing really cool things. And I'm a big believer in R&D, just rip off and duplicate. We don't need to
Still with glee.
Create new ideas.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan of that. I mean, my background in innovation tells me that there are very few new ideas under the sun, but there is loads we can learn from the other sectors. So I'm really excited about bringing some of that knowledge in. And I think, we don't need one practice doing it perfectly. We need thousands of veterinary practices doing it imperfectly and just not letting perfection stand in the way of action. So I'm hoping that the bite-sized courses that we develop, where we can do almost like a 101 for sustainability, to say, let's speed date you to what we mean by sustainability in veterinary, and then there's a number of springboards and adventures that you can go on if you want to deepen your knowledge and expertise. Do you want to be a species specific expert? Do you want to look more generically at greening your veterinary practice? Do you want to look at biodiversity more laterally? Carbon literacy, do you want to get accredited? Where is it that you want to move through your journey? And we're hoping to offer a really comprehensive small smorgasbord, but that starts with that bite-sized stepping stone into some of the more in-depth stuff.
I know part of those big ideas is very much around education, because we all need to learn, don't we? I've been reading extensively over the last couple of years on economics as well, how, and actually seeing how finance companies are leading the way. Obviously, not all of them, but some of them doing really fantastic work, like we said with Aviva. So the educational courses are all there, but then, of course, it's bringing people together. And I know you're thinking around how do you bring all of the companies together, which is what I'm kind of been trying to do as well with Veterinary Green Discussion Forum, to make those discussions happen. Because, as I say, if we're going to compete on sustainability, we have to be the worst of fools, don't we?
Yes, we do. And another of our big ideas, exactly to your point, is an alliance with some of the biggest actors in the sector who've got the R&D budget, who've got the oversight and the expertise to be able to solve and tackle some really big issues. So we're going to be looking to pull that group together over the course of this year, and then for the benefit of the whole sector, have some real lines in the sand that we can draw, and some opportunities to look at, do we want to raise standards somehow? Do we want to clarify the best practice for certain solutions that we know will be big levers for change? It's really for the Alliance to decide on exactly where we head with that. But I'm really excited about the potential for that group. And I know it's something that you know a lot about, Anthony. So I'm absolutely sure you're going to be at the forefront of it with all of the great work that you do in leading the narrative in the sector.
And I know one of the other big ideas is very much around evidence-based science. There's so much controversy in certain areas, and I think I'm a big believer that as you learn more, you realize you know less and less. That it's not a black and white picture, that there's loads of grey, because it is holistic. If you affect one area, and as I said, you put loads of trees up, that helps with carbon, but it can destroy biodiversity and things. So we've got to, it is a hard thing to actually study and kind of prove everything, isn't it? Because we're in uncharted grounds. But I know you're doing some work with XL Vets
Yes.
around emissions and things, aren't you, as well?
Yeah, and BCVA, yes. I mean, we've got David Black, who sits on our board, and Ed, obviously, is a practicing vet, and some really brilliant partnerships there. So you're absolutely right. We're running a pilot project at the moment with them, where we're going to take about 25 practices through calculating their carbon footprint from a farm vet mixed practice perspective, so that we can analyse the data and give them a sense of how they benchmark. And that's something we'd like to look at across all the species types, because it's very difficult to track something that you haven't measured. So I don't want people to be unable to act because they're so busy trying to get this perfect baseline, but you do need some kind of before and after to be able to understand how you're tracking. And I think, if I almost imagine, like the simplest version is a pie chart. If I just got you to draw a pie chart for your business right now and said, right, Anthony, where do you think your biggest emissions lie? I'm sure you'd probably be quite capable of having a good go at it.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to do that exercise, run through the vet specific carbon calculator and go, right, is it the same thing? Are there some surprises here? And once you know where the big hotspots are for your organisation, then you know where to focus your efforts. And that's where the business case for sustainability, where we've got those kind of 50 actions that people can take in different parts of their supply chain and their value chain. That's where we start to join the dots and say, okay, so this is the big issue for you. How can we start to help you minimize your impact on the environment, but also actively get involved in benefiting your business? So this isn't just about altruism. This is absolutely about something that is good for your business, that will help you not only understand some of the risks to your business and your supply chain, but will flip those hopefully into opportunities. I think there's a big narrative around climate-related risks, certainly in what we teach at Cambridge, and we very much talk about the size of the opportunity for people that can spot it, and the need to collaborate to resolve some of the ways that we mitigate those risks, because those risks are bigger than our individual practices. These are societal risks, and they're sector-based risks, and their community-sized risks. So this is where we start to the 6Ws are really helpful in letting us see some of the different frames of reference that can help and guide us through how we might solve some of these problems.
Well, it was interesting. I think yesterday or the day before, Portugal and Spain, just their electricity supply disappeared. And I think this is, or a lot of it did anyway. And how do we as a veterinary practice, earlier on in the year I was at Fellowship Day and they were talking about the disaster in Valencia where so many people died.
Mm.
Obviously also animals, pets,
Mm.
farm animals. How do we deal with that situation afterwards? All of these things, again, with mitigation, we need to look at. And again, going back to the solar panels, if you've got solar and a battery and you're in the middle of an operation and there's a power cut, now, unfortunately, the power means that the way our power system is set up, although you've got a battery, the battery will stop working. But if you have a DC supply, you can click the switch over to there and carry on with the bitch bay until that's finished. Look after your vaccines, which potentially could be ruined if the electricity is off for a long time. So this is also a resilience, as you've said. It's about how will you run your business if there is some sort of disaster, catastrophe, loss of electricity, and it's not something we think about. So having that bigger picture where somebody like Vet Sustain can start helping people to consider those things is, massively important. And that's nothing about environmental sustainability. It's about the resilience of your business then as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. There's the huge financial red flags. I mean, we can look at some of the disruption to finance that we've seen in our wider world in the last few weeks to know
Yes.
that think that these bigger issues, and it's One Health, it's also geopolitics, it's the cost of living crisis. There's loads of different pressures that society's under, and all of those impact on our practices and our businesses. So for me, sustainability in the 6Ws is absolutely helping people to understand, bring a little bit of that future focus into the now so that people can understand what's coming down the line and
And
be
prepare.
prepared. It's
Yeah.
absolutely about preparedness and resilience. Like anything in life, for big stressful challenges coming ahead, is about how well you can prepare and understand the challenge and not feel alone. One of the best things about Vet Sustain is we have this fantastic community of people who are so passionate and have very different specialist skills and expertise, but are looking at, where are people having issues, where are people struggling, what resources could we create, what are people looking for and needing and curious or confused
Yeah.
about, how can we help them feel supported and on the journey together. So that's the thing that I think mitigates that feeling of being like a drop in the ocean with trying to take action in sustainability, when you plug into and find, actually, like this big report that came out last week around the 79% of people wanting to take action towards mitigating climate,
Yeah.
and being prepared to pay for it. I absolutely think that the vast majority of people are engaged. They're just not always sure where to start or how to
Yeah.
move through to benefit their business.
Maybe just finally to finish, I know you worked in the civil service, and again, looking at that mitigation point, the government is looking at the civil service at the longer term. There was a report from Aon, I think a few weeks ago, $368 billion of insurance costs from climate related disasters. Climate related disasters are up by 83% in the last 20 years. We're presumably going to have a similar picture because carbon will take time to come out of the atmosphere if that's the only cause of it. So where do you see that? Do you think, is government going to kind of solve those problems for us so we don't have to think about them as much as a veterinary sector, or do you think that we're not really very prepared for some of those things that look like they might be coming down the road if models are to be believed?
Well, I don't think I can speak entirely on behalf of government, but
Yeah.
I certainly from the conversations that I have. So I didn't work in the civil service. I am one of the facilitators on their Future Leader scheme, which takes
Right.
the top 400 leaders through each year towards civil service, but the senior civil service. But certainly the conversations that we've had over the last 12 months, they're very aware of climate change and biodiversity loss and some of the implications that has for wider society, the complexities, the stress that creates in the system. It is a part of the wicked problem. So you can probably think of various different geopolitics being one of them. We can see what's unfolding, both in terms of how the US administration is showing up at the moment, and that wider impact across security and cyber and geopolitics internationally. So these are all conversations that are going on, and certainly the leadership skills and development that I develop and facilitate absolutely looks at, how do we lead through complexity and change, how do we build our resilience. And I was in a planning meeting for only yesterday. The number one thing that we were talking about was resilience. People understand the huge cost and complexity and risk that is coming towards us, and they absolutely see the need to prepare society and the different departments of work.
And the huge cost if we don't prepare. We're just pushing it down the line, aren't we, really?
Yes, it's always bigger. So when I talk to any of the brilliant organisations that are scenario analysing different pathways for different sectors, when they cost the action 10 years down the line versus now, it's always 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
If we don't start preparing and mitigating now. So that's probably something that will come further down the line within veterinary, because I think we need to understand our get the evidence base and get some of the big issues tackled, and then we'll be looking at how we intersect into some of the other sectors and also into Europe. You're doing a great job of looking at what's the best practice, what are we understanding are the key ways that we could boost our resilience in the UK versus France, Germany.
Yeah.
Holland, we talk quite actively to New Zealand and Australia about what they're doing. We've got our veterinary practice course launching in Denmark next month. So there's an awareness that there's this growing population of best practice you can share and build learning together as well.
Laura, it's always great to speak to you. Obviously spoke to you fairly early on your 100 days. It sounds like you've been very busy, but doing good stuff, which is the important thing.
I hope so.
Laura, thank you so much for coming on. I know
welcome.
how busy you are, so I really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
And thanks everyone for listening. Hope to see you on a podcast or a webinar very soon. Take care. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.